The samurai, also known as bushi, were a group of skilled warriors that emerged in Japan around the 10th century and served in the military until the 19th century. These warriors were highly trained in using both bows and swords, playing a crucial role in Japanese armies during the medieval period. While popular culture has romanticized the image of samurai since the 18th century, portraying them as symbols of chivalry and honor, there are real examples of their bravery and loyalty. Some samurai even chose ritual suicide if their lord was defeated or died. Warfare in medieval Japan was as fierce and brutal as in any other region, and many samurai were motivated by money to participate in battles. As military roles diminished in the 17th century, samurai found new roles as moral teachers and advisors within their communities. Despite their historical significance, it's essential to recognize that the lives of samurai were complex and not always defined by romantic ideals of honor and chivalry. In ancient Japan, around the 8th century, the government stopped forcing people to join the military. During the following Heian period, 794-1185, wealthy nobles who were often away at the imperial court formed private armies to protect their land. This marked the beginning of the samurai, a term that originally meant attendant, because they served the nobles. There were other warrior classes, but the samurai had a special connection to the imperial court. As time passed, samurai started following a code called Bushido, which helped them earn respect and status among their peers and masters. Feudal lords, known as daimyo, hired samurai for their fighting skills to defend their territories, fight government-identified enemies, and battle against tribes and bandits. Samurai could live in barracks, castles, or their own homes. As samurai formed groups led by powerful warlords, they gained political influence. In the 12th century, leaders like Minamoto no Yoritomo weakened the imperial court, leading to the rise of a new military government system during the Kamakura period, 1185-1333. This system was controlled by warriors and led by a shogun, a military dictator. This dominance continued until the 19th century. In Japan around the year 792, the government stopped making people join the military. In the following Heian period, 794-1185, rich nobles created private armies to protect their land since they spent most of their time away at the imperial court. This marked the beginning of the samurai, a term that originally meant attendant, because they served the nobles. There were other warrior classes, but the samurai were the only ones associated with serving the imperial court. Samurai were hired by feudal lords called daimyo for their fighting skills. They defended the lord's territories from rivals, fought enemies pointed out by the government, and battled hostile tribes and bandits. Because of this, samurai could live in barracks, castles, or their own homes. As samurai grouped together under powerful warlords, they gained political influence. In the 12th century, leaders like Minamoto no Yoritomo weakened the imperial court, leading to the rise of a new military government system during the Kamakura period, 1185-1333. This system was controlled by warriors and led by a shogun, a military dictator. This continued until the 19th century. Many samurai, who mainly came from the Kanto Plain, gained important experience in battles against the Emishi, Ainu, tribes in the north. During these conflicts, warriors started following a code of conduct to build a good reputation and increase their standing among their peers and masters. Being brave on the battlefield was crucial, and samurai developed a tradition of riding into battle, loudly proclaiming their family history and past achievements, and challenging enemies to one-on-one combat. This practice later evolved into the use of banners in samurai culture. It wasn't until the Edo period, 1603-1868, that a standardized system of status and rankings was fully developed for samurai. There were three main ranks. In the samurai hierarchy, there were three main groups. Gokenin, housemen. These were the lowest-ranked warriors, serving as vassals to a feudal lord. Goshi, rustic warriors. They could work on their farms but didn't have the full samurai rank with the privilege of carrying two swords. Hatamoto, bannermen. This was the highest rank, and these warriors were expected to sacrifice their lives to protect their lord's interests. All samurai were under the supervision of their lords, but starting from 1180, a national samurai doker, board of retainers, was established to specifically keep an eye on Gokenin. This board could enforce disciplinary measures for any wrongdoing when necessary. From 1591 onward, samurai were no longer allowed to be both farmers and warriors. They had to choose one profession, with the idea that this would make them more reliant on their lords and, in turn, more loyal. Many samurai had personal assistants called baishin, and they also worked on the land owned by their masters. Samurai made up only about 5–6% of the total population in 1600, which was around 18 million people. Interestingly, there were no female samurai, but there was a small group of warrior women known as onna bugeisha, or martially skilled women. Samurai weapons. Samurai started training in martial skills as early as 10 years old. In the early medieval period, they rode horses and fought, mainly using a bow and occasionally a curved long sword. They also carried a shorter second sword. In 1588, a ruler named Hideyoshi decreed that only full samurai could wear two swords, making it an important status symbol. Samurai also learned martial arts, with 18 different types in the Edo period. The most valued skills were horsemanship, archery, and swordsmanship. From the 17th century, the sword became more important than the bow, earning the title of the soul of the samurai. This shift was partly because bows were cheaper and more accessible to foot soldiers. Both weapons reflected the samurai belief that battles should involve personal duels. Bows and arrows. Bows were made using bamboo strips wrapped around a wooden core, sometimes reinforced with cane for extra strength. They were lacquered to protect against rain. Arrows varied in length, with a typical size in medieval times being 86–96 centimeters, 34–38 inches. The shafts were crafted from young bamboo, and the arrowheads were made of iron or steel. Bird feathers were used for stability during flight. Samurai fired these arrows while on horseback, using a heavy wooden saddle with leather stirrups for stability, allowing them to stand while shooting. Samurai swords. Samurai swords had a curved design and were made from steel, a tradition dating back to the 8th century. Skilled craftsmen carefully controlled the carbon content for strength and flexibility. Japanese swords were known for their quality and sharpness. Elite samurai commonly carried two swords, a long one called katana, about 60 centimeters or 2 feet, and a short one called wakizashi, about 30 centimeters. Both swords were worn with the cutting edge facing up. The tachi, an earlier and longer sword, was worn with the cutting edge down. Sword handles were made of wood, covered in the tough skin of the giant ray, and tightly bound in silk braid. Samurai might also carry a short dagger called tanto as a last resort. These weapons were kept in decorative lacquered scabbards. Other weapons. Early samurai also used weapons like spears, yari, and polearms, naginata, which later became associated with infantry. Spears varied in length and were double-edged. Some had L-shaped blades for hooking enemy riders. Spears were used for jabbing rather than throwing. The naginata was a long pole with a curved single-edged blade, used for sweeping, cutting, and thrusting at enemies. Daughters of samurai often learned to use the naginata as part of their martial arts training. Samurai swords. Gunpowder weapons were known to the Japanese through contact with China, but it was the arrival of the first Europeans in the mid-16th century that introduced firearms to Japanese warfare. By the end of that century, about one-third of field armies had guns, specifically the matchlock arquebus, and some samurai even carried pistols. Samurai armor. Metal plate cuirasses protected by lacquer existed as far back as the Kofun period, circa 250,538. Later, more flexible armor was made using narrow strips of bronze or iron held together with cord or leather ties. Leather was also common for its lightness and flexibility. During the Heian period, 794–1185, samurai often wore a silk cloak called a horo over their armor while riding. It could inflate with air, deflect arrows, or identify the wearer. There were different types of armor, like the box-like oyoroi, which weighed around 30 kilograms, 62 pounds, and the simpler haramaki suit, which had a closer-fitting cuirass and a short skirt made of 8 sections. Thighs might be protected by guards, haidate, lower legs by greaves or suniate, and hands and forearms by half-armor sleeves or coat. With the advent of firearms, a solid chest plate became popular, often imported or copied from Europe. Surprisingly, samurai did not protect their feet. They only wore socks and simple rope sandals. A samurai's helmet, kabuto, was typically made from riveted iron or steel plates, resembling a skullcap with flaps for extra protection. Some helmets had face masks, menpo, with fierce features. Impressive crests in the form of crescents, horsehair plumes, or animal horns were often worn by daimyo. Helmets and armor displayed a samurai's rank, division, and home region through colored stitching, heraldic badges, and symbols associated with their families or military house, book. Dragonflies were a popular symbol representing the no-retreat mentality. Banners were also used for identification on the battlefield, with their size linked to the samurai's status. Bushido. Bushido or Shido, meaning the way of the warrior, is the well-known code of conduct that samurai followed. It was compiled in the late 17th century by scholar Yamago Soko, 1622-1685, a time when samurai were more like moral guides and advisors than active military warriors. Determining the actual level of chivalry practiced by samurai throughout history is challenging. Like warriors in any culture, practicality likely prevailed during actual battles. While samurai displayed courage and martial skill, promises and truces were often broken, villages were destroyed, and the defeated were killed, as honor was linked to victory. Samurai were primarily driven by financial gain and social advancement, leading to gruesome practices like collecting severed heads. Relations with peasantry. Samurai weren't always noble, especially towards the peasantry. They gained a notorious reputation among later European visitors for beheading strangers on the roadside just to test their swords, a cruel practice known as sujigiri or cutting down at the crossroads. However, the samurai had legal backing from the Tokugawa shogunate, 1603-1868, granting them the right to kill anyone of lower rank if they deemed the person to be acting rudely. Seppuku. Those in the top ranks of samurai were expected to fight to the death, even resorting to self-harm to avoid capture. The honorable method was seppuku or harakiri, involving self-disembowelment, as the stomach was believed to contain the spirit. The warrior would wear a white robe symbolizing purity and then cut their abdomen from left to right. As this method wasn't swift, an assistant often used a special sword called a kaishakunin to decapitate the samurai. If a samurai's lord committed suicide, followers and retainers were similarly expected to kill themselves in a code known as junshi or death by following. Yoshitsune, legendary hero. One famous hero in Japanese stories is Yoshitsune, 1159-1189, a legendary samurai. He was the younger brother of the shogun and a successful general in the Genpei War, 1180-1185. Yoshitsune is admired for being a loyal, honorable, and skilled warrior. As a youth, he learned fencing, cleared the countryside of robbers, and made the warrior monk Benkei his faithful servant. Winning battles, including leading a cavalry charge and leaping a boat bridge, he faced jealousy from his brother. Yoshitsune fled to northern Japan, where he was later found and trapped in a castle that was burned down. Some stories even suggest he escaped to become Genghis Khan. Yoshitsune's tale became a popular theme in kabuki and no theater. The 47 Ronin Honorable Revenge. Another famous real-life samurai story is that of the 47 Ronin, which happened in January 1703. After their lord was forced to commit seppuku due to an insult, his 47 samurai followers, now called Ronin, swore revenge on the offender. After 2 years, they avenged their master's death and placed the enemy's head on the master's grave. The Ronin were later punished but chose seppuku, ensuring their legendary status. They were buried beside their master at the Sengakuji Temple. Decline and mythologizing. The importance of samurai decreased with the Tokugawa shogunate's policies, bringing relative peace to Japan. Many samurai became teachers, administrators, and moral guides when not engaged in warfare. Samurai held a high social status, ranking above merchants, artisans, and farmers. In 1872, conscription was reintroduced, and in 1876, the samurai were officially disbanded. Despite this, their legacy continued through the title of Shizoku given to their descendants until World War II. Stories of samurai adventures were popular in warrior tales during the 14th and 15th centuries, and in the 18th century, there was a romanticized view of samurai. Even today, samurai remain prominent in comics, computer games, and other media, securing their status as a significant warrior group in medieval history worldwide.